That's what we're dealing with, not people involved.
So one of the things that we talked about at the beginning today, as we were starting our conversations about this offering that we wanted to keep bringing out and continuing to learn along, we called Beyond the Basics, was looking at what are some of the areas of inquiry that we have as a team of the four of us and that we heard alive in the circles that we work with. You know, we work together as a four and we work often all kinds of other great configurations in our work. And we wanted to look at, you know, outside of some of the pieces that we're already talking about in our work in the art of hosting, which we continue to do, what are some of the areas that we're really interested in continuing our learning? And what are some of the things that we notice when things are going really well, when we're working as a team and we're doing some of this work out in the world, when things are going well, what are some of the things that are present? And then when things are going sideways, which they do, you probably noticed, and is a really important part of our learning, what are some of the areas that we may not have been paying enough attention to, or what are some of the areas that we feel like we need to learn more in? And we started off thinking of them as pillars, and we very quickly fell off that notion, and realized that there are many things that hold up our work and many areas that we can look at, but these ones caught our attention, and so we're going to invite you into some inquiry on these areas with us over the coming days. And one of the things that we did in our first time in Columbus offering this was we actually so much enjoyed in our design process just hashing out what were some of our thoughts and some of our current learnings about these areas that we decided to actually bring it into the group time here together and just be able to continue our conversation a little bit witnessed by you guys. We brought out our timers and we've made a little game show out of it where we've each chosen one of the areas and we kind of rotate them around a little bit as we travel around and offer this Beyond the Basics. And we have 2 minutes for one of us to just talk about some of the stuff that we're noticing. Some of them's up on the circle that we happen to sit down next to. And then we have 3 minutes for the rest of us to just kind of throw some stuff into the mix. And then we just move to the next one, wherever we're at. So by no means is it an exhaustive list of everything that falls into this area of inquiry, but we just kind of see where we land with it and we pick funny sounds on our iPhones and it's a good time. So we're going to begin, and I'm wondering if I need to continue to use the microphone. Is this okay? Can people hear me well enough for this piece? I don't know if I'll hold it. It's really I will speak up. People behind you if you. Is that yeah? Okay, that's okay. So I will continue to use the microphone. Sorry, time. That would be right. Whenever you start. Okay, so today I'm sitting down next to the circle of depth. The circle of depth. Which happens to be in the whole flow of things an area of practice that's really dear to my heart in my own personal practice and also as I'm accompanying others and just witnessing the work that's done in the world. And I think there's kind of 2 pieces of that to me. One is that I think it's just absolutely crucial in terms of all the pieces. If there isn't enough depth in the holding the work in place as we're trying to move through difficult areas and complexity and some of the challenges that we hit, we don't have enough depth to anchor that. We don't have enough depth to inform our own navigation of that area. That's a place that I find it can often go sideways. And what I really realize is that that's a practice. It's not something that I can get to as a destination and then build everything from there. It's a constant and ongoing practice. Definitely a personal practice. I think a lot of people have already said that there's ongoing personal work to be done as we're hosting and participating in this kind of change work in the world. And then I also think there's a collective piece to it. There is some depth that we continue to build as we're in the action of the work that we're doing, and we can build that in relationship to each other as well. It affects a lot in terms of how we show up as leaders. I think the ability that we have to be working with our own stuff at a deep level amplifies the ability of others to step into that. I certainly have found it's very difficult for me to follow people into treacherous or scary territory, if I feel like they're not only meeting me at a level of depth that creates some sense of relationship and confidence, but also if they've got some kind of practice that when we run into new things that neither of us know how to do, that there's going to be some kind of relationship and some kind of practice there to hold us. Guys, what do you guys want to add about that?
Can you just explain what you mean by what you need in the way of depth?
Can you ask me that again?
Could you explain what you need from an organization in the way of depth?
Okay, so some things I would say is that there's attention paid to learning. There's an ability to have conversations that aren't always the superficial conversations, so we can talk about some of what's difficult. We can make time to have those kind of conversations, to look at some of the underlying pieces. And I think that the individuals that are involved have an ability to be learning and changing and have some humility around that and be able to listen. Some of those practices that allow us to be able to do those sorts of things, navigate territory that we don't know everything that's going to happen. And we'll keep talking about it.
Let's start after you.
So hopefully these will provoke lots of questions that we don't want to answer right now. And because what's going to happen after this is you're going to go into conversation with each other and you can dive into them. So the purpose here is to provoke things, and I think we'll not answer them. We'll just use this as a chance to provoke stuff, and if it provokes stuff, awesome, it's doing its job. Do I have anything to say about that? No, I don't.
Not at the moment, anyway.
This is a shallow description.
Yeah, there we go.
I think I left work with people because I was fooled about the level of depth they were willing to go to. So there have been times when I've seen projects begun that promise a lot, and the work isn't. Nobody is holding the level of work that needs to happen in order for that promise to be delivered on. So it's sort of like sometimes when people say, "Oh, we really want the magic, but we've only got 2 hours." I mean, this is the simplest form of a meeting, right? It's like, "Oh, I'd love to do an open space, but we've only got an hour and a half." You know, and I had a great experience with that 2-day open space we did. Can we do the same thing in an hour and a half? And it's like, no. And they go, "Oh, why not?" And I'm like, wow. It's like this cult of efficiency takes us away from practicing at depth. And sometimes, that principle of slow down to go fast really means go deep to go far, right? And actually, you can go far at speed there.
So I was so glad that when you talked about depth not being a destination and what you just said, because what I wrote down was there's no quick path to depth. I mean, sometimes we get there quickly. That's lovely. But there actually isn't a quick path to some of the things that we're faced with. If you're looking at being in an industry or context that is rapidly shifting and maybe even dying, you're not going to find a deep answer or a deep solution or deep next steps even in a 45-minute meeting. It's just not going to happen. And I was thinking about this working in Columbus, where I've been working with different leaders on different topics, and they care about things a lot, and we've been friends for years, and we had a circle about 3 or 4 months ago, and we've been meeting in circles together across different fields. These are leaders who are hosting transformative change. We had a circle about 3 or 4 months ago where for the first time, with these people I love dearly, we had a conversation about race that I didn't even know was possible with these folks. We've known each other for years. And so some depth doesn't happen necessarily quickly. There's no quick path.
Yeah, and sometimes you can fall into the circle of depth so deep that you never get out, right? And it becomes this super indulgent vortex of blah. Right? And then so I'm just there's a danger to depth. People love it because suddenly it's really deep and we're falling in love with each other, and it's just oh my gosh, this is just amazing. And I'm so transformed. Yeah, but actually nothing. It's that whole thing. There's nothing. Depth can be a trap. Any of these can be a trap, I guess is what I'm saying. I'm just picking at depth because we're in it, But it's a
Depth trap.
Yeah, it's a depth trap. Yeah, what happens when there's a depth trap? You drop a depth charge. More on that later. Let's just go through the
Yeah, go.
Yeah? Okay. So breadth, 2 minutes, basically I feel like the ask is there. I feel like increasingly myself and many of practitioners being asked to take things to breadth. Whereas before we were being asked to like host a good conversation, now we're being asked to host multiple conversations across 2 different departments in government, you know, or whatever it might be. Or we're hosting conversations across whole communities. So I feel like the ask is there, right? It's on. But the work is going to a completely different level of breadth than it was 10, 11, 12 years ago, where it was this kind of like weird thing on the outskirts of society now. It's increasingly mainstream, world is more participatory, and we're being asked to take on greater and greater scale of work, breadth of work. And then I also think that that's beyond our control. So it's happening to us. It's not that we're creating that. That's just happening to us. And so I think that's a really important piece here, is that we're not running it, it's running us. And it's like, how do we now stay on the circle, on the way together? And I think the danger of the breadth work is shallowness, is that you have very, very broad reach, but there isn't depth. There isn't depth to it. There isn't depth of relationship to it. There isn't depth of knowledge to it. There isn't depth of practice to it. So there's a huge danger there. And I think one of the things I'm just like exploring in myself and exploring in my work is that what happens with greater and greater breadth. And it's not just that the work's getting broader, it's that there's more and more practitioners. And the art of hosting started out as a group of 13 people in an open space conversation at Castle and Hall, and I knew all of them intimately as my closest friends at that point in my life. I see 1 or 2 of them once or twice a year if I'm lucky now, 15 years later. Because the art of hosting isn't 13 people, it's thousands and thousands of people worldwide. Right? So what happens with breadth is that you form these relationships happen at formation. And then they begin to disperse because they're holding something bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Right? And that's kind of painful and sad. That's why I got saved. Is silence allowed in the 2 minutes? I think it is.
I love this word breadth, and I've gone right off the word scale. Like taking things to scale. I haven't yet met anyone that's taking things to scale. I met a lot of people who use the expression taking things to scale. I've used it all the time. Oh, we're going to take this to scale. There's something more deliberate about breadth. Something more deliberate about making it broader. And we'll talk more about this, but to me this is a big aha in the moment. Is it there's kind of liberating from the tyranny of if you're doing good work, it suddenly has to change the entire world. You know, it's like slow down. And be strategic about how you take it to breadth. So that is about how do you fill the context you're working in for me. So there's something about that. It's a big inquiry these days. And we were Rachel and Sophia and I and Carol and others who were in Toronto. We were playing with this as well around social innovation, because the word scale is bandied around a lot in social innovation. And Zaid Hussain has had some good things to say about that too. And immediately, as Tim talked about falling into the depth trap, you can see how, as we go around here, I'm just going to invite you to be like aware of how each of these holds the other in creative tension. And so we chose these words partly for their rhetorical beauty, but also because they hold each other in creative tension. So that's interesting to me, how we marry breadth and depth together, and the other ones too.
One of the things that's interesting to me about the breadth inquiry is thinking about when we are looking at expanding, doing some work, and then looking to see where else or at what other level might this be helpful. Which are the pieces that it makes sense to replicate and make larger, and which are the pieces that really need to be organic to the space. I think really being in those questions, and I've seen that being a place that the breadth piece can go sideways, that we don't want to have to recreate the wheel every time, and there is something really valuable in the creation of the wheel and how it builds relationship and what diversity that it brings in. It's important. So just having that as a question, and then looking at the tension between each of the areas is really interesting.
So I'm thinking about the seduction of breadth, or scale, or whatever, and how much something worked once, or people felt good about it, and you were able to make change, and the seduction of moving it out, and pressure of moving it out and how we can feel like our work is really important if we impact a whole city or a whole province. And so the seduction of breadth is what I'm really interested in, and what exactly, for me, it can be a bit of a slowing down. Like, what exactly do I think I can do, and what do I think is possible, and being actually pretty realistic about that. Because I can get really excited about being asked into a national project, right? And like, oh, we're going to change. And it sounds great to talk about too. So I was doing this federal strategic plan on homelessness, which was fantastic, right? But it's also, there's a level of seduction and breadth that can move me off of my good sense and my center and my depth, that I think is just real and true.
And one of the things I like about what breadth demands is that suddenly you're working with people in very, very different disciplines. So it's not just like, your team isn't just a group of art posting people. Suddenly you're working with communications people and logistics people and game designers, and there's something about this type of work where I find it really exciting that they come from the same worldview, but they're in very, very different areas of work. And I love that.
So one of the things you notice is as you get broader, you start to attract the attention of sharks. Bigger fish are tasty. Right? If you start to make change in the world, suddenly power wakes up and goes, oh. And you can find yourself playing in fields of power that you never intended to be. And we love the idea that we might change the world. And I love this Thomas Friedman line around, oh, the Green Revolution, the first revolution in history where nobody gets hurt. Not so, right? Lots of people tend to get hurt in any revolution, in any moment where the new arises. And power combined with fear equals the end of most of our projects. Right? So I was talking to my uncle, who spent many years of his life as a vice president with RBC Securities. And I asked him what his job was, and he said it was creating markets. I said, how do you create a market? He said, well, you get $2 billion and you sell stuff, securities. And I'm like, shit. Like, I host conversations. He creates markets. Man, that's what we're up against, you know? And I looked at why, I looked and talked to him about, like, how do you get a job like that? And he goes, well, you know, it basically starts when you're 5, you know? You go to the right kindergartens, you go to the right schools, you get groomed, you get cultivated, you get coddled, you get weaned away. When you get into your 40s, there's like a handful of people in the world that anybody is going to trust the creation of new markets in the financial system to. And let's be honest, thank God. Because as much as I love you, if we rotated leadership around creating a new financial system every month, it would be utter chaos, right? Right? We do benefit from that stability. And it's so freaking entrenched. And so, like, to make our change work, we have to be in these active conversations with that kind of power. So we can't even talk about them at scale. I mean, we've got my union friends in the room here. They're experts in having conversations with power. Experts in having conversations with power. And so part of this inquiry is about, like, leading into that. Like, I love being in the streets. I love being in the streets. But sometimes you've also got to be in the boardroom.
So I love this conversation about power and how it's weaving through our different pieces. And I think there's the version of power that when we look at governments or those however many people that are running the financial systems or funders or the CEOs of organizations. And then I also like to balance that off with, like, what's my relationship to my own power? Yay. And so and often the stories that I have about the power out there and what scares me about it or what I don't like about it can be the same stories that are going to make it really hard for me to claim and understand my own. And so I think having the power conversation be internal and external, and when I look at practice, because we're all just in practice of stretching ourselves to be able to be in this work, learning about both of those. I can learn from my personal power how I might relate to that power, and I can learn from how I relate to that power, how I am with my personal power. But I think those pieces are both really important to be thinking about and practicing it.
Yes. Like that's, yeah. So there's something about, like, I feel like my distrust, because I grew up very rarely experiencing power or authority being wielded in a way that I felt was trustworthy or had integrity. And that was my experience growing up, whether it was education systems or in my family or justice systems. I never felt power was being wielded at me in a way that I felt was trustworthy. It took me a long time to find somebody. I was like, oh, there's somebody wielding their power. And when I met Tol for the first time, I was like, oh, he seems to be wielding what feels to me like power with some kind of integrity. But I found that journey has been about, for me to be able to walk into rooms with senior leaders or people who hold power and influence on that triangle, I had to have a different relationship to power inside myself. Like, my distrust of power meant that I actually couldn't work effectively in those places. Could not work effectively in those places. So I've had to go through loads and loads and loads of inner work around my distrust of power out there. And it's been all about my distrust of my own power. It's been all it's been about. My distrust of my own power and my own strength and my fear of my own impact.
And power's not only personal.
No.
I mean, there are collective expressions of power and group expressions of power, and I think that the personal piece of power is incredibly important, and we need to attend to it and be doing our own work on it. And the other reality is Tim's personal work on power is going to get him a different place in the world than my personal work on power. So there's something about, it's not an either or, and it's not just based in the personal, and it's not only collective, and it's not about groups. It's just more complex than that. So I think one of the fallacies that sometimes people leave this kind of participatory work with is that somehow if I get right around these issues, the world's going to get right around these issues. And that's not always the case. It's important. I feel a little negative Nelly today.
No, bring it.
You had your turn yet, so that's
Destruction of death. So there's something for me around power is not something to be self-helped out of, or that's not, it's also acting in the world.
Nice, thanks, Jules. Awesome.
So let's talk about friendship. So, all that being said, so I wanted to talk about friendship, which is, I think, actually, as we've been talking as a team, one of the places where we are having the most kind of crunch together. What does that mean? What do we mean by it? How does it work in the world? It might be one of the places where we're the least clear. So I just wanted to say a couple of thoughts and explain that I think that this is really, for me, emerging, and my thoughts about it are emerging. But when I think about friendship, and when I say friendship now in groups of people and in places where there's power in the room, I get a sense that people think that that's somehow naive. You know, friendship in our work could be naive. And I think that actually friendship is a very radical act, and it's a decision. Like, I'm going to be friendly, I'm going to be friends, I'm going to be a person who people want to be friends with in this work. And so there's something about not getting caught up in friendship is lovely and it's amazing, but it's also a decision and a radical act in this kind of work. We're not taught, we're not reinforced, we're not shown that friendship is what gets results. And so when Tim has the triangle and results are part of it, he said relationship. And I think that for me, when the work is so hot, it's not even relationship, it's friendship. I'm not going to go, I told Chris, we were doing a proposal recently, and I'm like, yeah, but you have to be in the project, because I'm not going into the project with this other person. I like her, we have a nice relationship, but I'm not going to walk into a room talking about race and reconciliation with someone who's not my friend of my heart. The other piece that I want to say is around accountability. So I think that there's like this double-edged sword around friendship and accountability. I will go to the mat for my friends. Like there is nothing I wouldn't do for the 3 people in this circle, and I will show up and I will get work done, and I will stay up till 2 in the morning. Huge amounts of accountability with my friends. On the flip side, friendship can really be a vehicle for lack of accountability, and I say that because I used to work in violence against women. where the people who you loved and the people who loved you were the people who were hurting you, and accountability was completely absent, right? And so it's not that friendship only gives accountability, at its best it does, but it can also lead to a lack of accountability. And so that's just kind of a piece to be aware of. If we have time, I'd get it back, but not. That's all right.
So a couple thoughts I'll add. One of the things that I've enjoyed about having this area for us to talk about and some of the other places that I've been tossing it in my work with people is just noticing it gets people's attention right away. It gets us into conversations about, you know, what is it that we mean about friendship and what kind of boundaries do we put around friendship and what from the friendship, you know, department would be actually helpful for me to stretch myself into my work. So I think that resonates for me Tuesday, that bit about it's like it's a radical act and it's a conscious act. And that some of the ideas that I might have about friendship and what that means could actually really be limiting me. So when I start to think about that and stretch that, and then it makes for some really good conversation, and then the relationship building and the friendship building that comes out of that really serves our work. And I've just noticed the best work I do, and the work that seems to hold the most turbulence, there's always a level of friendship in the team that's quite deep. And it's not always with people that would have been who I picked in 3rd grade, because we just like the same color and we're always happy. Like that's one of the things that I think is really funny about the friendship concept. People automatically kind of assume it means, oh, that means we're friendly to each other all the time, and we're really, and it's like, no, we're willing to go through some stuff. So anyway, that's it.
I think this word gets thrown around a lot in our work without much analysis or understanding, and I feel like it's often used irresponsibly. Like, we're friends. It's like, dude, we just met like 3 weeks ago. You know, like it takes years really to become my friend, if I'm honest. Like I'm a slow joiner. You know, I mean, like relationships of depth don't form over days. I mean, they might do for others, but not for me. So I often feel like this word is used really flippantly in this world, you know. And I think it takes time. I think it does take going through dark shit together, you know, to become good friends. You know, you don't become good friends because you party all night. You become good friends because you work through some tough stuff, right? And so I think, so there's something about that. And there's also something, I mean, and so, who's being, what would you call it? Negative Nelly. I think the other side of this is that this friendship dynamic that's so central to the work can also create really strong dynamics of who's in and who's not. Right? And it's like, I definitely love working with my friends, you know, but that can end up me being working with the same people all the time, not being particularly open about working with anybody else. Right? Or it can mean all kinds of things, yeah? So like, there's lots of like high school dynamics that can get tied into this thing. But we've just got to talk about it. Because friendship is essential, but we can't ignore the shadow of it. We've got to be talking to each other.
And I think that's why friendship, over all these forums we've been talking about them in the world the last few months, I always thought power would be the one that would scare people more, but it's friendship is the one that people are like, and I think it's something to do with the fact that we can be tactical and strategic about the other three, but this one you need to actually step into, you know? Like I think it's essential. I do think it's essential for carrying hard work and going deep, going broad, confronting power, and befriending power. Oh my God, right? Like it's one thing to confront power, it's another thing to befriend it. See, it just triggers everything in a way, right? And you can't get tactical about it. You have to follow a fierce heart and have an army of love, or you're screwed.
Go on, choose. You have some last words. I think it would be quick.
Yeah.
I have a little quick thing before we move. It was just to say one of the things that came up when we were working with this yesterday. These things are all a direction. So it's not like you have to have a fully formed friendship to be able to be doing good work. It's just like, let's pay attention to this important piece. Right. So I think any of these, there are areas of inquiry and there are directions that we're traveling in, that we're learning in, and that we want to pay attention to.
Right. Yeah, and they all grow at different speeds. Some friendships grow really, really quickly. You know, even with me, some friendships grow really, really quickly. You know, and sometimes depth doesn't. You know, but the collective depth in the whole team doesn't go really quickly. Just with 2 or 3 people. Sometimes you don't. It's not that the whole core team needs to be friends. It could actually be that like 3 or 4 people are really good friends, but people are all friends with each other, but like there isn't shared friendship among the 8 people. But it's still the friendships between the 2 or 3 that are able to hold it. So it's like, yeah, they all move at their own speed.
So, a little fun to get these